What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and another Outriders video. The patch notes and the new patch, the massive patch that we've all been waiting for that was supposed to come at the end of July, has just dropped for Outriders. And what I wanted to do was spend some time with you and walk you through all of the different things that changed in the patch. This is a big one. There's changes to a lot of the pack tree nodes of all 4 of the classes, as well as several bug fixes and general improvements to the game, including some quality of life changes which we've been wanting for a very long time. So let's dive right in. Quick side note here, I know this is a super long video, but this is a massive patch with a massive amount of changes, huge amounts of information, and also I want to share my thoughts on these changes. So I've tried to compartmentalize the information as much as possible. Please do use the timestamps that I've provided if there's specific things that you're interested in. And again, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. So starting us off right away with the quality of life changes, the first one, the big one that we've all been waiting for, we now finally have item locking. Can I get a fuck yeah? This is a feature we've been asking for in the community as players for a super long time. This is of course to help us from, accidentally or drunkenly deleting an item which was important for a build or something that we wanted to hold on to. Up until now, you've had to do, transmogs, anything weird like that to kind of just remind your brain not to actually do this. And this is a huge step in the right direction for inventory management, and I'm super happy about that. We also have some additional development of the quick mark functionality, which basically now means that you are able to differentiate when you quick select between legendary, apocalypse epic, and apocalypse legendaries, which is just a further refinement that's needed for when you want to use those group select mechanics, but you don't want to catch the wrong group and accidentally delete that. So 2 big things here. That's one off the list. Item locking has been something that people have been asking for since day one, and it's super awesome to finally see it here. Now the next part I'll just briefly touch on, because essentially all it does is it just explains the thought process, and I am thankful that people can put this in to when they discuss about patches and everything like that, because it often helps to understand the mindset or the reasoning as to how they get to certain metrics and certain decision making points when they do start making these adjustments. Now, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but the gist of it is essentially that after a few weeks of Worldslayer, maybe 2 or 3, something like that, I mean, we're basically approaching, I would say, the first month now of it being done. Of course, they had a wealth of information before available, but the point is what they were able to do then is to create a full view of which pack nodes are being used the most and which ones are being used the least. Now, overall, this showed them that there was a certain amount of these nodes that were literally in almost every build, and so these were considered extremely strong, and in a way that if you didn't pick them, you were somehow handicapping yourself. On the other side of the spectrum, there were things that were being chosen less than 1% or less than 5% of the time, and so these were obviously choices that weren't attractive enough. Now, what is also super interesting is that they primarily saw this behavior with the Devastator, the Pyromancer, and the Technomancer. What is interesting is that with the Trickster, it seems that players are kind of like really all over the place, and most of the nodes in Trickster has an average pick rate of 25% they mention here, which is, I suppose, where they kind of want to land. So that then of course means that you can already guess that as we go through this, Trickster seems to be in a way like the class that's been touched the least, and definitely a lot of focus has obviously gone into Devastator and Pyromancer, which could be the outliers and which could be the ones where you literally have to pick a certain group of nodes to be able to deal damage, and the rest of the stuff is just trash. Now, before we look into specific detail on these classes, on these pack nodes, and discuss some of the bugs that were fixed, definitely we need to look at the general balance changes that we have across the game, and this is essentially things that kind of like rebalance the end game in a way, or the way in which we upgrade our gear. Now, first and foremost, it's mentioned that Apocalypse tier leveling now is reduced by 10% starting from Apocalypse tier 20. In other words, the required XP for you to progress up in tiers has been reduced by 10% at each level. So this is, I was thinking, personally for me, I thought the sweet spot would be somewhere around 20 to 25%, simply due to the fact that I've lived through the pain of 35 to 40. And so 10% might not be quite right where we want it to be already, but I mean, I'll take it. 10% less is pretty big. And I mean, you know, we will need to test this, of course. That's the thing. So a lot of the comments, and I'm saying this right off the bat right now, a lot of the comments that I'm making right now is because I'm reading the patch notes and I haven't actually done any testing myself. That's because it's not as if we have access to, as ambassadors, to a earlier version of the patch or anything like that. So I'm experiencing this at the same time as you guys. So a lot of the things that they're mentioning in the patch notes here, you better believe I will be testing, and I will be bringing my findings to the channel and to the Discord and everything like that. So if you want to get a head start on that sort of information, definitely keep an eye out for the Discord invite in the description of this video, and go ahead and jump on in there. And that's probably the best way to also get in touch with me. Now we go over to resources and anomaly extract, which I tend to call dust. So if I call at any point refer to something called dust, please just understand that I'm actually calling anomaly extract dust. Now they say here that the amount of anomaly extract gained has generally been improved, and the amount of anomaly extract, aka dust, see what I did there, gained in Tarya troves has been increased by 500%. And what they say is a full run through of Tarya Gratar, including troves, should now net out around double the amount of anomaly extract earned per run when compared to before this patch. I don't understand, like, this is like triggering the maths in me somehow, because if they've increased the anomaly extract gained in the troves by 500%, certainly you should be netting more than double at the end of a run, unless I'm somehow, like, you know, experiencing a brain fart here and this doesn't make any sense. So either it's not 500%, or, you know, either this statement is kind of like misleading in a way. But again, something that we need to test, obviously. Now they mentioned boss rushing the final arbiter, which of course means just shooting straight through the middle, and just doing the final arbiter will net slightly more anomaly extract than before, but this will not be the most efficient route for anomaly extract farming. In other words, what they want you to do is they want you to do what is generally called a full run of trials, which means literally hitting all of the troves or most of the troves, and then essentially, you know, that all together gives you the anomaly extract. I'm super interested to do some testing on this to see where that, you know, ends up being, so keep an eye on the channel for a video specifically on that topic. Next up is crafting and upgrading, saying that starting at item level 50, the anomaly extract cost required to upgrade gear has been reduced by 5%. Again, step in the right direction. I would say maybe 5% is not strong enough quite yet, but please understand though that nowhere here do they mention that this is the final time we look at this. We're not going to touch any, you know, it again, anything like that. And what you will surely see as we go through the rest of the patch notes is that People Can Fly are not scared of reversing a bad decision or tweaking something even more. We'll see that with some of the mods and some of the packs tree things that have been changed, which previously were a high number, then they made it a low number, now they're pushing it back up to a high number again. So they're tweaking the knobs and bells and whistles in the background, and it certainly means that they're not scared to do that sort of thing, right? So what they're saying is between the two above changes, meaning you're getting more stuff and you're also spending less of it, players should be able to support upgrading 2 full sets of gear per apocalypse tier level. This should enable a greater amount of experimentation and limit the need for, you know, hoarding resources. So basically what they're saying is as you are moving, let's say for instance you're apocalypse tier 32 and you're on your way to 33. Now what they're saying here is that in the time that it takes you to go from 32 to 33, you should, with this new system of theirs, with these tweaks that they've made, you should make enough anomaly extract and obviously drop pod resources and titanium and all of the resources that you need to keep 2 full sets up to your level. In other words, as you're going to 33, once you hit 33, you'll have enough mats to bring 2 sets up to 33 as well. So again, something that we need to change. Certainly this is a big problem in the game right now, and those of players that have actually made it quite deep into close to 40 or maybe even 40 will know the insane amount of materials that you actually need to upgrade even just 1 set. So being able to do 2, 3, 4 sets on 1 character is a gargantuan effort, a insane amount of, you know, farming that you have to do. So yeah, we need to see if this actually addresses that issue, alleviates some of the strain, and perhaps if it's just not enough quite yet. Then last but not least, or well, second last, we have Apocalypse gear drop rates. This says that starting at Apocalypse tier 11, right, the increased chance for Apocalypse variant gear has been increased for each Apocalypse tier. Now, of course, we can see this when we look at the Apocalypse tier screen, where it shows each of them and it shows the percentages of everything that we can get to drop. So what they're saying is they've increased this. They're not saying by how much. So this could be 1%, 2%, 5%, something like that. I doubt it'll be 5%. Per level. That's obviously too much, but definitely this is something that we need to keep an eye out for, because this could just mean, you know, obviously that we're getting a lot more of the gear that we want and not so much of the gear that we don't want. Last but not least, and this is a fucking huge one for me, I am super happy with this change. This says that expedition rewards have been increased in order to make expeditions feel more viable alongside Umfufu. The loot gained per X time investment should now feel quite similar between expeditions and Taragatar. That's fucking great. Personally, for me, I am super tired of doing trials of Umfufu. I'm kind of over it. I'm really enjoying just blasting through the expeditions now again. It is a way that I also enjoy playing with my audience. It means that I can help more people, you know, within an hour, more people I can get runs through and everything like that. And giving us the ability to get variably the same amount of reward spending an hour doing expeditions as we would get spending an hour doing Taragatar is fucking great. Players should now receive a greater amount of epic and legendary items and comparatively less rare items. This was a big issue. Every time you popped open a chest at the end of an expo, you'd get a whole bunch of blue gear and you'd swear at the gods. So this will hopefully curtail some of that bullshit. Last but not least, anomaly extract farming should now also feel much more viable to do in expeditions. This is something that I will expressly test over the weekend and bring the results next week. So this is something that I'm super interested in. Making expeditions super viable, or at least as viable as trials, is a massive step in the right direction. I'm a huge fucking fan. Then on to bug fixes. This patch has a metric shit ton of bug fixes as well. I'm definitely not going to go through each one of them line by line. Absolutely check out the patch notes, which are linked in the description here to the Reddit post where you can see that, or you can check Twitter or anything like that for the full patch notes. However, I do want to call out some of the bug fixes here, because these are things which people regularly ask me about in comments, which people regularly comment about on videos and in the Discord and everything like that. And this really does, you know, look like we've dealt with quite a few of these painful items. A good example, the first one, just under general bug fixes, we have one here that mentions that fixed a bug that allowed players to miss a PAX point if they transitioned out of the fisherman fight too quickly. This is something that has impacted a lot of people. By the time they get to the end of the game and they kill that last arbiter, they're like, the first arbiter, they're like, holy shit, I still just have 4 out of 5 PAX points. What the fuck is going on? So this is definitely good stuff. Super happy about that. Then the next one, under general, what I would say bug fixes to skills and nodes, there's an entire section on the Trickster. And this is really important because the Trickster is causing a lot of pain with things like hunter prey messing around, people getting stuck in geometry and all that stuff. So really there's some good mentions here. For instance, the fact that hunter prey skill triggered if enemies were using cover. You couldn't use hunter prey. You kept on getting target not reachable, target not reachable. So that seems to have been dealt with now. Again, these things will be tested. So if this hasn't actually solved the issue, I will be surely, you know, bringing it to the channel. We also have fixed the bug that caused tricksters to lock up if they used hunter prey on an enemy who died at the same time. I've personally never had that happen to me, but people have mentioned to me that that's an issue. Fix the bug, every single one of these almost is hunter prey. Fix the bug that could cause tricksters to get stuck in geometry. That has happened to me tons of times. Then fix the bug that could cause tricksters twisted round skill to remain active indefinitely if a player was staggered during a reload animation. Haven't seen that yet, but great that they worked on it. Fix the bug that caused the Venator's knife skill to deal inconsistent damage when used in combination with certain mods. This is something that I've picked up on because I use Venator's knife a lot and I often combine it with other skills. So super glad that this is here. And then last but not least, also fixed a bug that caused the Time Rift mod weightlessness, which is a mod for Time Rift, to end prematurely. So again, good stuff. A lot of things targeting specifically the pain that Trickster players are experiencing. So good shit. Then also under the bug fixes mods section, there's two that I want to give a call out to. The second point there, fix the bug that caused the relativity theorem mod to inconsistently refresh and in some cases even extend cooldowns. Now, relativity theorem is a mod that says you basically reduce the cooldown when you crit enemies, right? And so the problem is that in certain cases, this was actually increasing the cooldown. I tested this mod because I had an idea to use it for something. And I was like, what the hell's going on here? This is not working as it should. So good to know. And then also the 8th one, which is self-medication. This is a big one, guys. Self-medication has kind of like been like the underground clutch survivability mod for a while right now. Most people, when you mention to them that you're struggling with survivability or something like that, the first thing that they'll suggest to you is, hey bro, throw self-medication on your armor. It is overworking at the moment. It's performing much better than it should. And basically what it was doing is it was fully restoring you every time you used the skill, i.e. triggered it, where in actual fact it shouldn't be healing you for that much nearly at all. So that now has finally been corrected, and so that mod will not be kind of like the crutch that you can lean on anymore, because it is actually working the way it's supposed to, the way that the tooltip, the way that the mods text says. And then last but surely not least, we have the bug fixes enemy section here, and there's specifically one here that says that fix the bug that could cause the arbiter to be locked in a melee attack loop if the player targeted them with the hunt to prey skill at a certain moment. Now, this was a strategy that Trickster players employed, and I saw a lot of videos showing, you know, like this is what you need to do to bug the arbiter out, and so that he never goes into the raising the axe, you know, animation and does that AoE. So you could essentially reset him in a way every time by just hunting the prey onto him, and that would make him want to melee you, and then you could just back off, shoot, or do your thing, and then just keep doing that. So that obviously has been corrected now as well. But then we get to the part of the video which I think everybody's interested in, and that is of course the balance changes for each one of the classes, specifically their packs, trees. But before that, let's look at, there's also a section on balance changes which affect all classes. So this would be mods that are available to all classes, and also legendary sets that drop for all classes. Now, first up, we have the Maxwell Demons legendary set. This basically says that it fixes an issue where the bonus firepower, the set bonus of this set, right, was only attributing your bonus firepower to that effect and not the total firepower. That means that the set was actually underperforming and not nearly as strong as it should be, or at least how they wanted it to be. So they've corrected this now, and people who are using this set now should notice a pretty big power increase here, because it's not just using your bonus firepower anymore, but your total firepower. Next, we have the Trigger Twitch set. Now, this says that it increases the firepower coefficient from 40% to 280%. This is a massive increase. And this says that it fixes a bug that prevented the Trigger Twitch set, that's a hard bunch of words to say, from prioritizing targets properly. Now, it says that this was launched with incorrect values, making the set severely underperform. This is an adjustment to bring the intended power level. This is a big move in the right direction for this set, and certainly the test that I'd done with Trigger Twitch was really just terrible and made it look like, you know, absolutely not worth it. This is obviously a huge boost to it, or rather, this is putting it at the power level where it should be, and it should be very interesting to look at this now. Then, of course, we get to the 255 million pound gorilla in the room, and that is, of course, Mage's Rage. Now, we in the community and everybody like that, there's been, you know, massive discussion on this mod and the fact that it actually overperforms what it's supposed to do. So it's not giving you the 40% as it mentions in the tooltip, but far more than that. So this is them addressing this issue, of course, saying that they fixed a bug that caused unforeseen issues with the amount of stacks and the anomaly power calculation. Essentially, in a way, it was doubling up, or, you know, 2.5 actually, you know, increasing itself. And essentially what it was doing is it was multiplying itself, basically, right? So this fixed the bug that was preventing stacks from dropping away as intended when players swap weapons. This effect should go away like Fortress goes away if you swap your weapon with Fortress on it, and in some cases it was also not doing that. Now, the explanation here is saying that Mage's Rage provided over twice, so 2.5, right, of what it was supposed to give in terms of anomaly power. This change sets the mod in the right place power wise and actually makes it do what it's supposed to be doing. So 4 crits gives you 40%, boom, done. Sorry, my nose is itching. While this change may feel significant for any players who were relying on this as their crutch, right? Our overall balancing has ensured that not all the excess power has been lost. You'll understand what they mean by that when we go in deeper into the rest of the general changes and the rest of the changes on the pack trees. Because what People Can Fly have done here now is they've actually adjusted some other things up to kind of fill this power vacuum, so it doesn't feel like that much of a drop, the fact that you now don't have this massive ramp up from Mage's Rage anymore. Rather, it has flowed into other mods and combinations. They basically say it much better than I could. But that's essentially that. Then when we move over to self-medication, I've already covered this just now with the bug section, but this was of course performing far better than it should. It was restoring full life instead of just the percentage based as the mod specifies, so that has been corrected now. No resistance against the fortified unfortunately takes a nerf to the head. Now we know that before this used to be 50%, and then with Worldslayer it was increased to 100%. What they're saying is they're reducing the conversion rate of resistance piercing to anomaly power from 100% to 65%. So that it's losing 35% of its conversion rate. They're saying that was launched with unintentionally high value. However, after seeing how dominant it has since become in builds, we are only trimming some of the power instead of fully reverting it. Fully reverting it would be taking it back to 50. This change should diminish the ease of exceeding 100% resistance piercing, which was the main cause of unintended, unfixable damage increases. Now, just addressing what they said at the beginning, that how dominant it has become in builds, the fact of the matter is I play a lot of anomaly, and it's gotten to the point where if you're not using the no resistance against the fortified combo to boost up your AP, you're just, nerfing yourself. Basically, you're nerfing your own damage. So this is obviously a way for them to also maybe bring in the whole... A big thing for People Can Fly is the fact that they don't want certain mods to feel like if you're not using it, you're an idiot. If you're not using it, you're limping yourself. So they want it to be the fact that there are no clear, like, oh my god, outliers, aka forming metas, but rather that, play whatever you want to play and you're going to perform as good as the other guy that's doing something else. I don't know if I entirely agree with that. I kind of like the idea of a meta, but so be it. But again, this is definitely a nerf to how we have experienced no resistance against the fortified to thus far, because we had 100% and now we're at 65. Then Dark Sacrifice, which took a massive hit when the game launched and a massive reduction from 75% additional weapon to 25%, now gets taken from 25% to 35 again. And the reduced health in amount from 50 to 25. So it's doing far less damage to you now, right? 25% less damage to you, and you're pushing 10% more damage out. So kind of like a nice little adjustment on Dark Sacrifice here. Bullet power builds will really be happy about this change. They're saying that essentially this was hit too hard with the launch of Worldslayer, so restoring some of its power and to reduce the amount of drain. Next, we have Killing Spree, kind of the same idea as to what the changes that they made to Dark Sacrifice they do here as well. They kind of went in too hard on Killing Spree, so they're saying that the damage boost per stack is now from 10% to 13%, which is nice, and they're saying that they're increasing the duration from 8 to 15%. This certainly makes Killing Spree viable again, and it definitely is something that would be great alongside, Dark Sacrifice and Fortress, something like that. But it's a good move in the right direction, because they put Killing Spree into the ground where essentially it wasn't worth picking anymore. Then we have Fortress, which is officially probably the mod that has changed the most in this game so far. And that now says that the increased damage boost, which is 20% at the moment right now goes to 25% again. So again, an increase of 5%. And they're saying we're restoring some of the offensive power it previously lost, so the mod can keep up with the other amplifier mods and essentially make it more attractive. And then last but not least, we've got these 5 mods to look at. First things first, of course, another fan favorite, something that has been big in the community right now. This essentially goes back to the way that it was before Worldslayer. So before Worldslayer it was 30%, they changed it to 50% with the release of Worldslayer. They're reverting it back to 30 again. Now essentially this is a huge a mod in the sort of AP community, where you're changing armor piercing into resistance piercing and then changing resistance piercing into anomaly power, and this kind of like nerfs that quite a bit. 20% is pretty big. But what they don't mention here is whether it's intentional that when you reload your gun, you keep that buff indefinitely, as long as you don't shoot your gun and as long as you don't swap your weapon. They mention here that they really don't want to have this idea of people running around with guns, just holding them so that they get the benefit from the gun, but they never actually shoot the gun or use it, aka a stat stick. But again, they don't address the fact here that does this wear off after a while, or is the idea really that you shoot, reload, and then you have this buff indefinitely until you change your weapons or fire your gun? So again, we'll have to test that to see if that was maybe just not mentioned in the patch notes, but actually has been changed. Tactical Retreat says that it increases the base damage from 54 to 62. They're increasing the damage of this mod. They're saying we're increasing the damage of this mod to make it more competitive with golden standard mods like Thunder's Legacy. As Tactical Retreat requires additional planning and effort to make the mod effective, it should feel rewarding to rely on. So these are the mods, the group of mods that deal AoE damage around you based on a certain criteria, like a certain amount of time passing or something happening. So this is just to make that more attractive to pick. Shock and Awe, increase range from 5 to 10 meters, fix the bug that caused Shock and Awe mod to trigger more often than intended. This was actually making the mod overperform. Now they're saying we're increasing the range to make the mod compete better with similar ones, again, like Tactical Retreat, like Thunder's Legacy, like the Shock, all of that. So anomaly power class nodes and anomaly, so they mention it twice here, the last 2 points here, but this is at the bottom of these patch notes, and it is actually such a massive boost, right? So they're saying that anomaly power class nodes at the moment right now in all characters trees, if you pick up anomaly power increase class nodes, they are 10% each value. They are upping this from 10% to 15%. That means overall it's going to net you far more anomaly power, and this is a way for them. I mentioned when we discussed Mage's Rage how they are trying to compensate players for the perceived loss of lethality with Mage's Rage now performing the way it's supposed to, and not this weird ramp up shit that it was doing before. So this is pretty big. This is it's quite a bit. I mean, if you pick up 6 of these nodes, that's a 30% increase overall, which is pretty big. So again, some testing will have to be done here. I think this is going to produce some really good numbers on certain builds. And then just below it, it's mentioned increased weapon damage value. So this should actually be saying weapon damage class nodes, but just like the anomaly powered class nodes have increased now across all characters, if you pick up a weapon damage class node, previously it would give you 8%, it now also gives you 15%. Now this is a huge buff, and for a while now firepower players have been complaining and saying, what is the reason for why I should even play firepower when AP classes can just walk in and just lay waste to entire rooms of enemies. Now that's still going to be the case. AP should be the AoE king, but this means that firepower is going to be able to compete with raw damage on target, probably overshoot with raw damage on target, and it's a big buff to your blighted rounds, Technomancers, and your firepower Tricksters and all of that. So this is pretty good, and I'm sure there's going to be a whole bunch of players that are happy about that. So for the next section, when we look at the specific changes to each one of the classes pack nodes, what I want to do is I actually want to have the game open with the pack tree of that class open, and then show the old nodes. So this is very important to remember, show the old nodes and then refer to the patch nodes and explain to you what has changed. It's just a way for me to also visually carry out exactly which one of these nodes changes, and it's a good way for you to also keep track of knowing which nodes you used in your build, and so they're knowing which changes you can expect or have happened. So the first class we're going to look at is Devastator. Of course, Devastator had a crap ton of changes to its pack tree, and we're going to start right off with Earthen Shell, which is down here. Now Earthen Shell, what they did is they added a 0.5 second cooldown to this. Previously this did not have a cooldown, so the point was that the issue is that this was like insanely powerful. Devastators are super hardy by themselves already as is, and this was essentially just making it, as hard as it already is to kill a Devastator, this was making it even more difficult to do that. So this is just a way for them to essentially just trim this a little bit and actually have this performing alongside other options in the same category basically. Then when we look at the next one which was affected by this patch, it's Multi-Strike. Now multi-strike and its baby brother Upheaval are responsible for causing these massive sort of like baked in earthquakes that you could have with the Devastator. And the problem with that is, as they mention here, its untamed potency has been a topic of discussion since the launch of Worldslayer. In an attempt to not completely gut its numbers though, we've applied a cap to add a movable through anomaly power ceiling to the node. What they mean by this is the maximum amount of damage that you can get out of a multi-strike now is capped at 700% of your anomaly power. That means the more your anomaly power increases, the more the 700% increases, but you can never exceed the 700%. Terms of engagement, which is over here, has exactly the same cap then as well. So the stored damage, right, because that's the mechanic that we're talking about here, stored damage and stored damage are both capped at 700% of your anomaly power. And the reasoning for these two changes are exactly the same. More specifically, terms of engagement was what was allowing people to infinitely ramp Boulder Dash and then create this one-shot mechanic that Boulder Dash was famous for, which, or at least recently famous for, and obviously which People Can Fly have considered to be an exploit or a bug or anything like that. So this caps this and essentially makes it so that you can't do this anymore. However, it is an interesting change, and I'd like to test this and see whether you can still get some impressive numbers with Boulder Dash, and that it hasn't completely broken the build. But certainly these one-shot, infinite ramp, builds are not possible anymore. And then we also have Finishing Touch, which sits at the top here. Now, Finishing Touch is specifically related to firepower Devastators, which even with the changes that they've made to the tree here and everything like that, it's still, I guess, not as popular as they'd like it to be. So they definitely want to incentivize players to play firepower Devastator more. So this increases the ammo to weapon damage coefficient. What they mean by that is Finishing Touch says that it increases your weapon damage by a percentage of the missing ammo. Now previously that was on a 1-to-1 conversion. So if you were missing 40 bullets, it increased it by 40. At least that's what the explanation here says. So what they're saying now is it's not on a 1-to-1 anymore. They, however, don't say what they made it to. Is it now a 1-to-2 or a 1-to-5 or something like that? So again, we'd have to test this here. Luckily, I have some footage of the old numbers, so it's going to be interesting to compare the two and essentially see where we end up. Next up, we have Impact Point, which sits over here. So they've increased the scaling from its current 30% to 50% of anomaly power. So this is actually a massive buff, right? This says that it forms part of the overall power shift that they want to introduce for Devastators, and they want to move the Devastator meta away from its current form. Now, at least the way that I see the Devastator meta right now is you're either playing Seismic Commander Bleed Quake with like ramp up, or you are playing the Boulder Dash meme build, right? So this to me means that they're trying to open up the floor a little bit more, that you don't feel that you have to be running Seismic. And again, guys, you can play with anything you want. The point is, if you want to be dealing the most damage, you have to be running Seismic Commander set, and you have to be picking certain of these packs nodes. But Impact Point, big buff here. It's almost double as strong as it used to be, so that's really good. Then when we move over to Obliteration, this says that it increases the base anomaly power and resistance piercing from 6% to 8%. This is also another buff, pretty big actually. This says that each enemy damage increases the bonus by 3% up to an additional 9. This means that instead of starting from 6, you start at 10, and then you can get to 19 instead of getting to the previous, I guess, what was it, 15. So the point is that, again, they want to make it a more competitive choice instead of picking Puncture all the time, which is obviously the one that people take because it gives Seismic, skills Bleed, and it increases your anomaly damage against Bleed by 10%. The idea is to make people consider whether, Obliteration doesn't better suit their build, and that's of course a good thing. Now, although I did mention Upheaval before, they have a specific section on that as well, saying that this increases the stored amount from 10% to 15%. And this is interesting. Again, like I said, they're not just trying to nerf stuff. They're not just trying to make certain, options less viable. What they're trying to do is they're trying to adjust the power curve. So while we do see this cap on multi-strike now, we do see this increase in Upheaval of 5 additional percent, which is great. They're saying that as we have applied a cap to multi-strike, and the bug fix will now make Upheaval only store the activated player's own damage, because before it was actually storing everybody's damage, which was another big problem, right? We are increasing the amount of stored damage as part of the overall Devastator power shift. Okay, then we have elitism, which sits all the way at the top here. Elitism essentially says, you know, this has been changed. They're saying that it fixes a bug that prevented the Devastator packs node elitism from correctly working on bosses. So sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. It also says that it reduces the cooldown, which is currently 5 seconds. It makes it 1 second. So this means that shots on elites reduce incoming damage from those elites by 15% and increases damage against them by 30%. This means that before it was on a 5-second cooldown, so you could get it for 5 seconds and you would have 5 seconds off. Now you could get it for 5 seconds, have 1 second off, and then get it for 5 seconds again. Again, a pretty big buff. And then last but not least, we have overwhelming force just below it. This says increases the armor to damage conversion of 40 to 60. This says at the moment right now that while a protection skill is active, you release seismic impulses every 2 seconds that deal damage equal to 40% of your armor. Now it's going to deal damage equal to 60% of your armor, which again is a pretty damn big buff. Next up, and I told you Devastator is getting a lot of changes, we have some changes to the class tree itself actually. The first one being that we have down here Paladin and we have up here we have Champion. Now they've changed the way in which these two capstones or these two choices work. They've removed the protection keyword from it and now essentially makes it activate from any skill use. The idea here is to open up the fact that you don't need to use reflect bullets just as this, you know, quick activation thing, or by that matter golem, and that they actually want you to pick those skills if you really want those skills in your build. This is really big, and it's kind of like a game changer. It means that you can pick up those nodes and just have them activate from any skill use, and it's kind of like a big deal. It's pretty damn sweet. So that's of course Champion, and again what you're looking at here is the old ones, and of course when you look in the game right now you'll see that this change has been affected. So this will actually then activate from any skill. Then we also have a change to Mighty Tank, and what they're trying to do here is they're trying to increase, you know, Warden's capability or Warden's viability in the game. So this says that it increases your firepower by 5% of your armor bonus and increases your anomaly power by 5% of your armor bonus, and this is actually capped at 40% currently, or in the old version. Now patched, this is capped at 50, so that's a 10% increase that you can see there, and that's obviously to try and get you to use this more. Next up are 3 changes to some mods for our armor. More specifically, the first one we have to look at is a massive change, and this will come as a shock I think to a lot of players, is of course the change to Despair. Now Despair is of course a mod for Leap, and this has long since been a fantastic way for essentially Devastators to debuff an enemy or a boss and then just get massive amounts of damage out of it, due to the fact that Leap, or rather Despair, made you deal double damage. In other words, it was a 100% boost. This boost has now been reduced from 100% to 30%, which is a massive loss. And how they explain it here is they're saying that Despair empowered Gravity Leap has dominated the Devastator meta as an omni tool since Worldslayer launched. It has provided both uncontested survivability and damage debuffs while also being a powerful gap closer. It really is a fantastic skill, and once you use it, and specifically use Despair, you kind of feel like you can't go without it. Now while the survivability is a unique characteristic, I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but the most important thing, and I want to refer to something that I mentioned at an earlier part in this video, is that they're wanting to do the fact where they unshackle people from feeling that they have to use a specific ability, they have to use a specific mod to be able to be competitive against other players or against bosses or anything like that. So this pulls Despair in line with the rest of the debuff abilities in the game, and it's not this massive outlier anymore with like the best debuff in terms of additional anomaly damage to an enemy that you could potentially get. The other 2 changes here are both actually tier 1 reflect bullets mods, which they've changed, and this is of course to try and make that skill more attractive for people, more as a utility skill and not as a boost skill. So bullet acceleration is the first one, saying that it increases the base damage from 33 to 60. So this is just them trying to increase the additional damage that you get from that effect. And then of course strongest first says that it increases the damage to the enemy with the highest HP from 50% to 75%. So again, them wanting you to use reflex bullets to actually reflect bullets instead of just, you know, using it to essentially prime up your AP. Then finally getting to the last part of the Devastator changes. The end is in sight for Devastator. Here are some general changes to actual armor sets for the Devastator, and all of these are sets which at the moment right now are competing with your attention. Instead of you using Seismic Commander, they want you to try and use these. The first one is Bannerlord, which says that it added extra functionality that provides 35% anomaly power bonus. So again, just making this much more attractive to you. They're saying that Seismic Commander has been the dominant, Devastator pick for a long time due to its multipliers. The idea here is that this makes Bannerlord more attractive for you to use and a viable option other than Seismic Commander. And I'm actually super excited for this. I'm hoping that this is actually a change that's enough to dethrone the Seismic Commander set. Next up, we have the Martial Legendary set as well, which says that it increases both percentages of shared physical anomaly damage from 30% to 50%. So of course, Martial set allows you to use Endless Mass to essentially share damage between enemies, and this actually increases that coefficient from 30% to 50%, which is another big increase. It's almost double, so that's pretty good. Just exactly the same as their Bannerlord explanation. They want to make this set as attractive as, or a viable option other than Seismic Commander, and this definitely is a step in the right direction. I'm personally a fan of the Martial set. I'm personally a fan of Endless Mass, so this is good stuff all around. Then we have the Concussioner, which is a set that kind of like doesn't really have an identity, at least if you ask me. The point is that, and I mean, they even mention it here. It's funny choice of words. The Concussioner set suffered from a severe case of identity crisis. The set was initially designed as an anomaly power bruiser. So what they've done now is they've actually changed it from anomaly power to firepower. And the secondary attributes they've switched to have a mixture of close range damage and status power in. So this kind of changes the way that the set works. And I think this puts the set kind of like where it needs to be in terms of what you want to do with it. So they've said that they've decided to shift the set to support firepower builds in the same way that Deathproof set might do. For both of these sets, damage is generated primarily from armor statting and the set bonus effect. This change for the Concussioner set should also unlock better synergy with the PAX nodes through Overwhelming Force. So again, just trying to make this actually be something that is worthwhile picking, and definitely Concussioner would be something that I'll be testing in the very near future. Last but not least, the statue's leg slot gets special mention here, saying that this leg slot now provides bonus firepower instead of max health. Fundamentally, changes were made to any gear. Well, actually, let me mention that at the end there. They're saying that with Worldslayer, we rolled out changes to attributes for legendary sets to make them more coherent and appealing to player. This change is just the finishing touch of those efforts. So essentially, they wanted to have this in place for Worldslayer, but now it is with this patch. Now, the two notes here are very important. What they're basically saying that what you have to remember though is that if you already have these gear pieces, then they're gonna be the old versions of this gear pieces. So they're saying fundamental changes made to any gear pieces may not apply to existing items due to the way the game spawns and stores loot. So it means that any newly dropped pieces will actually be this. We've seen this before, for instance, with the patch before this, where the Techno armor pieces were changed, and we essentially had to refarm those pieces for the changes to actually be on that gear. So you could end up with two sets of gear, one the old version and the other the new. And onto Technomancer. And even though they said at the beginning of the patch notes that Trickster is by far the least affected, we actually also have very little changes to the Technomancer. But again, I just want to mention that what you're looking at is the old PAX tree, and you're looking at the patch nodes next to it, and this is just a way for me to show you which nodes have changed. But of course, it features the old values of the PAX tree and the new values on the patch nodes. I hope that's clear. So the first one we need to look at is, of course, lethal devices. We knew that there was going to be some form of change to this. It's performing really well. And this essentially says that it added a 0.2 second cooldown to this node's secondary effect, which is the one that says, so the secondary effect is your ordnance and gadget skills inflict toxic to enemies hit and deal additional 5% of anomaly power as damage if toxic was refreshed. That's the secondary effect, is this additional 5% of anomaly damage. Now, in a way, this is going to affect triple turret Techno. It shouldn't be that much of an effect. 0.2 is very little if you think about it, but with the rapid firing of the crowd turrets, this is probably going to make some form of an effect. We'll definitely test that and bring the results to the channel. This says that Lethal Device's secondary effect was fairly overwhelming when used with a few builds that capitalize on an excessive amount of damage events occurring within a second. This change should control the excessive amount of events slightly without killing the node's damage effect. How much this changes will, remain to be seen. Then we are moving over to Twin Reaper. Twin Reaper is of course dedicated for sniper builds, and at the moment right now, or the old version said that sniper weapons shots have a 75% chance to trigger an echo. This echo deals 25% of the damage. The change here increases this echo from 25% to 35%. Definitely what they want to do is they want to make it so that, it's even more viable to potentially build a sniper variant of the Technomancer. And also there was a bug here that would sometimes just completely disable this node when you change from area to area, so you just notice that this echo isn't happening anymore. So this has also been addressed. Next up we have Kinetic Converter, which sits all the way down here. This is essentially the path for the Technomancer that is for healing builds. And what they're saying here is that the healing path for Technomancers has long been underrepresented, so we are increasing this pack node's frequency to ensure the benefit of overhealing and then the damage buff that comes with that. Of course, how Kinetic Worker works or Kinetic Converter works is that critical shots heal the nearest ally for 20% of their max health. If an overheal occurs, it actually gives them 30% increased damage as well. And this was on a 5-second duration and then a 5-second cooldown. So you had 5 seconds up, 5 seconds down. Now it's on a 5 seconds up, 1 second down, 5 seconds up, 1 second down. So pretty big change overall, which should make this more attractive and definitely something that I'll test. Last on this particular page here is Hastened Influence. This says that it increases, so basically how a Hastened Influence works is that it reduces the remaining cooldowns of one of your skills by 0.5 seconds for every status removed by you or applied to enemy by any player. Now there's an AP version of Techno that you essentially cold snap the entire time, and you use that to apply additional, obviously freeze to enemies, which then essentially gets further cooldown of your other skills. Now the point is that this takes that cooldown reduction from 0.5 to 1 second, which is massive. And they know how big of a change this is, because they're saying here, we feel the node didn't really hasten a Technomancer's influence over enemies. I beg to differ. I was very, very impressed with some of the numbers that I was seeing with this, and being able to just get really, really snappy cooldowns, almost as good as Convection on a Pyromancer. This is actually just going to make this more insane. And as they mentioned here, winter is coming. You are going to be able to perma-freeze shit with cold snap the entire time. Last couple of changes for Technomancer then is Burrowing Charge, which sits all the way down here. This essentially says that critical shots inject enemies with an explosive charge for 5 seconds, dealing 250% of anomaly power as damage upon the next critical shot taken. This is on a 5-second cooldown. This changes the cooldown from 5 seconds to 3 seconds, which means you'll be able to do this more regularly. And it's saying that Burrowing Charge is performing well in terms of numbers, so we're targeting the occurrence rate to make it more fluent during hectic multi-enemy encounters. So previously Burrowing Charge was really, really good on bosses, but because of its cooldown, it wasn't really good for you to use in a firefight, or you wouldn't see it proc as often. Now of course it will. Now the last two changes when it comes to Technomancer is actually specifically targeting Blightfire on one side and also targeting the Downpour legendary set. So specifically on Blightfire, the problem is that Blightfire was actually not inheriting some of the toxic multiplayer mods, and so they brought Unity to this and they disabled this bug now, or they fixed this bug. I don't know if you can disable a bug, they fixed it. And so now you will actually be seeing that synergy between them. And they've also mentioned that there was a bug that caused Technomancer's Flame Leopard's Blightfire set to bonus to consume and trigger off of Toxic from other players, which in turn denied those players their application of Toxic. So it really wasn't interacting very well if you had other people that were trying to do the same thing as you within a party. That's been addressed now, and I really love the explanation here. Shit was broken, we fixed it. So I have a build that specifically works around Blightfire. I'm really, really interested to jump in and test this. Lastly, as I mentioned, the Downpour set here, which specifically works around clusters or Scrapnel. This says that it increases the cluster scaling from 100% to 115%, and this is just going to make it more attractive for you to build those Scrapnel, those grenade builds. There are already some really, really spicy, good-looking builds, right? Those I actually want to give my boys over at Babylon a shout out here. I know that they have a very, very spicy one for this, and this is just going to make this deal even more damage and actually make it a fully, not that it wasn't before, but make it a fully viable choice for Techno. And next up we got Trickster, and they definitely didn't change nearly as much with the Trickster as they did with the Devastator, but we do have some changes here however. And of course we are looking in the background at the old packs tree, and then we're using the patch notes as a guide to show us what changed. The first thing we have to look at is quantum entanglement, and really the change here is all enemies in close range share 20% of the weapon damage. That has been changed to 30%. The point here being that if people want to use cleave damage, or rather want to access cleave damage on a Trickster, they kind of have to use Time Rift and its mods. This gives you an alternative to if you want to use 3 different skills and you don't want to use Time Rift, then this still gives you the ability to cleave with a Trickster, and obviously this idea is to make this more attractive to you. Next up we have special tactics. And I realized that quantum entanglement was hidden behind my face, but as you can see the patch notes on the side, hopefully it wasn't too confusing. Then we have special tactics over here, which says that at the moment right now, or in the old version, it said damaging elites increases your damage against elites by 3% for 3 seconds. What they've done now is they've changed that timer from 3 seconds to 5 seconds. The idea here just giving you some time to search around the battlefield for the next elite without actually having the damage drop off, hurting your damage when you then engage that elite. It's a welcome change. I think 3 seconds was a little bit short, so 5 seconds is definitely a move in the right direction. Next we have cheap shot, which sits over here. This is essentially a way for you to strip armor and resistance off enemies with your class melee, and this said that it did it with 30% for 5 seconds. That has now actually been increased from 5 seconds to 10 seconds, which is double the amount of time. And then the shred is 30% to 40%. So this is overall makes cheap shot super attractive, and is a fantastic way for you to debuff an enemy or a boss or a captain or an elite and just actually strip a whole bunch of stuff off them. Then next up we have Spectral Spike. Now Spectral Spike itself is a skill that I really like, and what they've done is at the moment right now the cooldown for Spectral Spike for its ramp up, as you can see there, is 1 second. Essentially, if we read out the whole thing here, damaging skills have a 100% chance to deal additional damage equal to 15% of your anomaly power. Consecutive triggers on the same enemy stack up to 750. This is very similar to what we see on the Pyromancer, where you have the dot builds that, you know, stack up like that as well. And the idea here is that they're saying that it simply wasn't stacking fast enough, so they really want to make it a little bit more attractive. So they've carved the cooldown time in half. So instead of 1 second cooldown, it's a half a second cooldown. Now personally, I'm already a big fan of Spectral Spike. I think it's really good, and this just makes it even more attractive to me. Then we have 2 changes actually to some skills, right? So we have one change to where is it, to Temporal Blade. So overall they've reduced the base cooldown of Temporal Blade by essentially 3 seconds. That is going to be a massive cooldown in terms of once you apply all of your cooldown reduction and everything on that, you're going to have access to more Temporal Blades more often, which is a good thing. They're mentioning here that currently they don't see Temporal Blade being used in a lot of builds. I don't know what they're talking about. I love Temporal Blade. I have like 2 builds that use it, so this is just going to make me use it even more. That's fantastic. We also have a change to Slow Trap. It's kind of like the similar thing. What they've done is they've reduced the cooldown from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. This is the base cooldown at the beginning, which again, just what they want people to do is feel that they can use Slow Trap more often and actually use it in their builds. I experiment with Slow Trap all the time, especially on a Trespasser set, you know, Trickster, benefiting from the additional deception damage, or the additional damage you get from using deception skills. So of course that seems to kind of want to make me use it even more. Then we have an actual change to a mod, which is a armor mod specifically for Cyclone Slice. Now Cyclone Slice is a skill that I'm not a big fan of at all, but Wind Slash here is supposed to increase the base damage from 6.5 to 13, which means that overall it's just going to make this deal a lot more damage over time. So they're saying here that Cyclone Slice is having a hard time fitting into the Worldslayer environment, so we're giving it a boost to base damage to make it a more viable choice. And then last but not least, what we need to discuss with Trickster is a change to the terminal velocity set. Now currently, or the old version of that set, gave you a weapon damage bonus increase by 60%. This has now been increased to 80, so 20% additional. What they're saying here is firepower Tricksters are underperforming slightly in comparison to anomaly power Tricksters, so we're adding extra power into the set to even it out with the Shield Beast. Now we all know Shield Beast Trickster is really good and can push out some serious numbers. I was actually kind of like, you know, I wouldn't say I was impressed by terminal velocity, but I thought it was really good, and I actually have a build that's all ready to go with terminal velocity. This is just going to make that deal even more damage, and I'm super pumped for that. And finally we arrive at Pyromancer, so let's all wake the fuck up and see what they did to my baby here. But first and foremost, we have to look at carbon footprint, which sits all the way over here. And this says that each enemy hit by a mobilized skill reduces the cooldown of another mobilized skill by 0.5 seconds. Now this has actually increased that cooldown reduction to 1 second, so it's overall it's like double as good, so to speak. So it says that the immobilized path in the pack skill tree is underrepresented, so we are increasing the cooldown reduction from weaving both immobilized skills in to stimulate builds relying on constant ash applications. So again, generally speaking, I think we can all agree that the bottom packs tree is by far the most popular pyro packs tree because it contains convection, and so they need to do things like this to incentivize people going to the top. Now the next point we have to look at is carbonization. Carbonization says enemies hit by your immobilized skills receive 20% more anomaly damage for 4 seconds, so it's a ramp ability. This then increases the multiplier from 20% to 25%. So again, just further on incentivizing people to come up here and actually use this. Then of course we have to look at convection. And I knew this was coming because convection is just too damn good, and it was really just, you know, performing far too good for its own well-being. But essentially convection says that it reduces all skills cooldown by 4 seconds when all your skills are on cooldown, and this itself, this effect, is on a 3-second cooldown. Now what they've done now is they now only make it reduce all skills cooldown by 2 seconds instead of 4, so it's basically nerfed in half. And what they're saying here is convection launched in an undesired state with improper values, i.e. too strong. As a result of this, it has completely overshadowed the arsonist path, which is of course what they're referring to is this path here that gets us to arsonist, because by just getting convection, you don't need this shit. You don't need this. Just convection is good enough, and then you can go basically anywhere else that you want to go to. So as a middle tree point, it is really too strong, and it kind of almost seems like convection, I mean, this whole tree in a way should have been scrapped, and convection should have been perhaps like the final pointer or something like that to really drive down this, you know, low cooldown, super fast skills out ability. By the way, I'm not saying that's what that's how I want it to be, but it kind of seems like they have this issue right now that convection is so good that it basically gives arsonist a fucking identity crisis. So due to the positive feedback loop it generates, we are shifting its nature slightly to chip away cooldowns instead of fully resetting them. Low cooldowns and skills on tap remain one of Outriders Worldslayer's key tenets, but launch their convection went too far down this path. Then next up we have arsonist. This is exactly basically the point that I was just trying to make. So this reduces the cooldown from 5 to 4 seconds. This arsonist effect of activating skills has a 30% chance to reset all your skills. Was on a 5-second cooldown, it's on a 4 now. That's not a massive difference in my opinion, so still I don't feel like it's hyper attractive, and it's not necessarily something that I would probably lean into too heavily. But again, because it was overshadowed by convection, they have to make the change to convection, and they kind of have to make this a little bit more attractive as well. Then we have Solar Flare, which sits over here. This says activating skills increases your critical damage by 10% for 6 seconds, and this can stack up to 2 times. In other words, you can get 20%. Now you can see that the critical stack goes from 10 to 15, which means on a double stack we get 30, which is overall a 33% improvement, which is pretty good. They're saying that similarly to immobilized path struggles, the critical path was overshadowed by bullet frenzy, which is of course the middle one here. So they desperately want people to give these and these a chance, and so that's obviously why we're seeing this changes here. Then we have critical mass, which sits over here. Critical mass says critical shots on marked enemies turn all shots to critical shots for 2 seconds. This change is pretty big now. This changes this 2 seconds duration to 5 seconds, so it's more than double as good now. So this says that critical mass was designed to be baked in Balmer's Rage and was meant to offer a competitive choice to bullet frenzy. So the difference being that this one has this kind of like ramp up slow effect in bullet frenzy, whereas critical mass is the whole thing of like you get those critical shots to mark an enemy and then everything is a crit. Pretty big increase from 2 to 5 seconds. It really does make it comfortable in terms of like how many bullets you can get out of the gun before you lose that effect, so pretty good. Next up, we have Master Exploder, and this says that explosive skill damage is increased by 100% of your resistance piercing. This is really good, and it's one of the reasons why we see such great builds with thermal bomb, but also great builds with eruption. Now, this has been nerfed quite significantly, so the 100% now becomes 50%. They're saying that Master Exploder has been overperforming when combined with the amount of resistance players. So players that are stacking resistance piercing, armor piercing, anomaly power, all that stuff. This was just already they were stacking resistance piercing to get that additional AP, and then they were still getting this 100% increase as well. So we are committing to a power shift inside the branch, relaying power from Master Exploder, to trigger sequence. And we're going to cover trigger sequences now, but the point is they want you to commit further into the tree to be able to benefit from the massive increase that we see to something like, for instance, thermal bomb or eruption for that matter. So, but you could do it with Master Exploders. You could just go all the way over here, and then you could go elsewhere with your points, and you would still benefit quite a lot from resistance piercing on those explosive skills. But now, if you really want to tap into some serious damage with explosive skills, you have to go deeper into this tree here. Now, we do have Backdraft here as well, which says your anomaly power is increased by 30% for every skill on cooldown. This has actually been reduced by 5% as well. So now instead, the ramp per stack is 25%, which means if 2 skills are on cooldown, you get 50% instead of the 60. So this is a slight-ish nerf. I guess this is about what, 15%, something like that. But yeah, so this again, the point is that I would say that Pyro had a lot of options where you could do things like what you can see on my screen here right now, or you could come up to this point and go down to here, you know, whatever. You didn't actually have to push for capstones as much as you do with other builds, and you would still have really good results. Now the idea is to really push you through and down a tree to get to the capstone so that you can really capitalize on that additional power. Alrighty, and on to the final page. So we have trigger sequence. This is, as I've mentioned now, the idea is they're trying to get you to fully commit to this. So if you want those big fat eruptions and thermal bombs. So this, how trigger sequence works is, of course, it stores 25%, and this can, you know, happen 3 times. That storing has now been increased from 25% to 35%. So what we are losing out in Master Exploder and potentially in Backdraft, we are getting back with this increase of 10% per stack, essentially. Now, I'll do some testing, of course, because it remains to be seen if the two kind of like cancel each other out. This could potentially be a better version of that actually deals far more damage even, which would be fantastic. But of course, we need to check that. Burnt Offering sits over here, and this is classically thought of as the dot build, the damage over time build for Pyromancer. And like we saw with Spectral Spike, the idea here that they're saying is that this just simply does not ramp fast enough to make it attractive. So the old version of this would ramp, increase your burn duration by 500%, and each consecutive burn taken on an enemy dealt 10% more. They are now doubling up on this ramp, so instead of dealing 10% more, it's now dealing 20% more. So again, we'll have to test this out, but that does seem quite juicy. So definitely I will come back with some results. You'll know that I'm good with the Pyromancer. I gotta represent my my burning glass here. So then Wildfire and Conduction sits over here and just flat out gives you cooldown reduction of 15%. And if we go to the skill tree, rather the class tree, then you also have Wildfire over here. Now both of these, they are saying that there was a bug in the game, that these were actually being sort of like diminished by global cooldown reduction cap, and so you weren't really getting the benefit out of them by picking them. And definitely I saw this, there was almost no effect because you can very easily hit this cap with your gear now having cooldown reduction on. So they've corrected this now, meaning that it will be meaningful for you to pick up Wildfire and Conduction, or just one of the two, and you will actually see that cooldown reduction actually affecting you in the right way. Then Mark of the Anomaly, I keep doing this. Mark of the Anomaly is the top tree for the Pyromancer, the increase in weapon damage nodes. So this is increase your weapon damage by 10% against marked enemies. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 of them here. And so what they're saying is that this has also been increased from 10% to 12%. And this is just in line with those firepower changes that we were discussing right at the beginning when we were talking about overall changes to all classes. So this brings firepower pyro in line with the other ones as well, and also benefiting them there. Now, susceptibility is specifically a mod in the in the Pyromancer's arsenal, and this said it reduced resistance reduction from 40% to 30%. So what this was is this was a mod that would allow you to cut some resistance from an enemy, and this was on 40%, while every other effect like this, like Asunder for instance on the Devastator, was only 30%. So they're just unifying these here now and making this be the same as the one on Devastator. And then last but not least, we have two sets to talk about. The first one being the Reforged set. This is a massive change for me, and I've been working on a Reforged build, and this comes at exactly the right time. I cannot believe this is awesome. Is that so Reforged, how that set works is that it's when you cast a thermal bomb, your next feed the flames is more powerful, and then after your next feed the flames, your next thermal bomb is more powerful. And the idea is essentially to sort of daisy chain these skills together like that. Now, that used to be 100%. With the change now on this set, that is 200%. So it's literally twice as powerful as it was before. So the point is that why they did this is because we have another set that came with Worldslayer called Heatseeker for the Pyromancer. And Heatseeker is a thermal bomb centric set. And so the feeling was that instead of people trying out Reforged, they would just go to Heatseeker, because the idea is, you know, it's more thermal bombs, so who wouldn't want that? They want the identity to be that Reforged is big thermal bombs and Heatseeker is lots of thermal bombs, and that is their move in the right direction here. Super excited to give this build a try. Like I said, I'm almost good to go on it, so let's check it out. Torturer also has been changed. Now, Torturer is probably the set on Pyromancer that I have the least experience with, just because generally firepower sets are not really my thing. But the point here is that Torturer itself has this shared damage mechanic of 30%, and this has now actually been up to 50%. So this gives similar to the Martial set, this gives the Pyromancer a cleave archetype. In other words, a way for you to deal multiple, damage to multiple enemies with one source. And that's really the reason for this change. And that's it. We have finally arrived at the end of this massive long video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. There's a whole bunch of stuff that needs to be tested from my side. I'm super excited for it. I've made several builds since Worldslayer came out. This actually makes me, well, not makes me, but I will go back and test those again and see the changes that we have there. For instance, Devastator will be quite interesting due to the fact that we have this sort of massive change in seismic and bringing the other sets up. But more so, also Pyromancer is heavily impacted, and of course we need to see what Reforged performs like now. Is Eruption still the the #1 DPS king? Does the change to Convection hurt it too much, and all of that? Plus, while we're doing all of that, we get to lock our gear now, so super excited for that. But let me know in the comments down below which changes you're happy about. I'm sure there's going to be changes that you're not happy about. Let's have a healthy discussion. Let's keep it professional. Let me know what you guys think about this patch. I think I wasn't expecting as many things to change as it did, but it has certainly given me reason to investigate things in the game and check out different builds and see how it's changed my stuff and see what else I can bring to you guys as an audience. So for me, it's a win because it gets me to play Outriders more. And hey, I love me some Outriders. But that's it for the video. Again, like I said, thank you so much for watching. It's really important to me that you guys have a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are in the world. And until next video, fucking cheers.
They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me now, best of me. They want the best of me now, best of me now, best of me.